And I said, if this elephant gets up and walks away, I'll look so dumb.
Yeah.
It'd be so embarrassing. So I was quickly able to put it in the vein, and she went back to sleep again. Then he came back to me like half an hour later and said, how was it? I heard that the elephant almost walked away. And I said, yeah. So where were you? I mean, I was like, you should have come and helped me. Then he's like, no, it's good. I heard you, well done. You managed it.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, that's how you learn. I'm like, that's a very steep learning curve.
Yeah.
This week's episode is recorded on location in Entebbe, and we'll be exploring the incredible world of mountain gorillas and other great apes, as well as a form of conservation that works. I'm super stoked to be joined by an awesome guest who you will get to meet in a bit. So get yourself comfortable, maybe grab yourself a pillow or a blanket, maybe also get a cup of tea or hot chocolate or coffee if that's what you prefer, and just create a beautiful, safe, comfortable space as we get ready to take this journey together. Today's podcast is made available by our patrons, and if you'd like to join that community, there will be a link down below in the podcast notes. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll find that in the video description below. Nuggets from this conversation will also feature on the African Safari podcast. The Africa Safari podcast is a sister podcast to the Jonathan Benaya podcast. And together with co-hosts from all across the African continent, we bring you an immersive safari experience. Both the Africa Safari podcast and the Jonathan Benaya podcast can be found on all major streaming platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio for those tuning in the US, Pandora, Castbox, Deezer, and all other major streaming platforms. I'm your host, Jonathan Benaya, and this is the Jonathan Benaya podcast. What's up, my beautiful people? Welcome to the Jonathan Benaya podcast, a show that is wild, very wild. We are proudly Uganda's #1 conservation and tourism show, but we also benefit from a listenership from all across the African continent and the world at large. We try to put out a new episode every Sunday with discussions ranging around how to make the natural world a better place, creating awesome images, telling stories with words, wildlife films and photography, with occasional musings on sound and tech. If these topics fascinate you as much as they interest me, I promise you this podcast will have you in a spin. I do share a lot of my personal experiences, and from time to time, I'll have 1 or 2 guests on the podcast to have some very insightful discussions. So thank you so much for tuning in, and enjoy your time here. Alright guys, welcome back to the Jonathan Benaya podcast, where we talk about the earth, words, wildlife films and photography, tourism and travel, and occasionally music. My guest today is Uganda's pioneer vet, whose years of determination, willingness to learn, and innovative thinking have created change in a world that needs it the most, our natural world. And it's for this that she's gone on to win numerous accolades, including the prestigious Champion of the Earth Award from the United Nations. She is a National Geographic explorer, and she's had her story covered so widely by both international and local press. And in the beautiful words of UN Messenger of Peace, Dr. Jane Goodall, my guest is a huge difference in the world of conservation, and she's an inspiring example to both young and not so young people all around the world. So ladies and gentlemen, the CEO and founder of Conservation Through Public Health, CTPH, and the deeply rich in taste Gorilla Conservation Coffee, the one and only Dr. Gladys Kalema Zikusoka.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
And thanks for having us out here in beautiful Entebbe.
Yes.
Yeah. So doctor, it's 30 years since you made your maiden trip into the gorilla kingdom, where you go to see your very first mountain gorilla. Do you mind just taking us back to that particular day and just help us paint an image of what that was like for you?
Yes. I would say that it was a really life-changing experience.
Yeah.
I had always I'd heard about the mountain gorillas first while setting up the wildlife club. in high school at Jubilee Secondary School in Uganda.
Yes.
And when I first heard about them, when I was in the Wildlife Club offices, they told me, I said, when can I see them? They said, they're not yet habituated. So that when tourism began in 1993, I got the opportunity. They told me then that now they are habituated. And so I convinced Royal Vet College, University of London, to do my study over there as part of my course credits. And so when I got to Bwindi, it was like I'd reached the ends of the earth, because it took a long time to get there.
Yeah.
It's about 10 hours drive from Kampala straight. At that time, we spent 2 nights in Kavale and continued. I was being hosted by the International Gorilla Conservation Program Country Director, Dr. Liz McPhee, who's also a veterinary doctor and had been working with gorillas in Rwanda. And now she had been brought to set up an NGO to carry out community conservation and gorilla tourism. And so when we got to Bwindi, it was incredible.
Yeah.
It was very remote for me.
I can imagine.
I stayed in a mud hut.
Wow. Yeah.
That was the main accommodation, unless you're staying in a lodge.
Yeah.
For the first time in my life, I stayed in my own hut at the top of a hill, which was quite scary because there was an open window, which never closed. Dr. Liz McPhee stayed in a bigger hut down below me with a Peace Corps volunteer, Tor Hanson. And so it was really magical for me.
Yeah.
I got to... That time there were only 2 habituated gorilla groups. So my research involved collecting fecal samples from their night nests and trails to check for parasites and bacteria. And so I got to do this. Liz introduced me to everybody and then left. So then I had to spend almost 1 month on my own. But it was great for me because then I had to get to know everybody and immerse myself with everyone. So that was really fantastic. But one thing I can say is that as soon as I arrived, I had a cold, so I couldn't actually go into the forest. I had to wait until I got better, which was very frustrating for me. It took me about a week until I healed because I could easily make the gorillas sick. So by the time I finally went in, I was like, wow, I can understand how I can impact the gorillas.
Yeah.
And it was really nice. I got to see my first gorilla. When I first saw my first gorilla, it was actually just one gorilla in the group that day.
Yeah.
Normally they live in a family.
A family, yeah.
Gorillas live in a family with a head male, silverback, dominant male with females and babies. But this time round, he was just on his own because the rest of the group had moved on. And he was not the dominant silverback. But once we saw him, the rangers tried to look for the other gorillas and they couldn't find them quickly. So we just observed one gorilla that day.
Okay.
It was called Kachupira.
Okay.
Because he had a broken hand. And so I felt a very deep connection when I looked into his eyes. And I could see how we're so closely related. And actually, when you look into their eyes, you actually realize they're just extremely intelligent. He had intelligent brown eyes just staring at me, like he's trying to recognize me. And it was a wonderful experience for me.
Yeah.
So I felt at that point in time that they're so vulnerable. We can easily make them sick.
Yeah.
They need to be protected. And that's what got me into just becoming Uganda's first wildlife vet after that.
Okay, fantastic. I've been to the gorillas a couple of times. Personally, mostly it's on photography and film assignments. And each time I go to the gorillas, it's a different experience. It's exciting. You see the little ones playing. You see the majestic silverbacks. And I'd like to know, over the years, as you continue to go out to track the mountain gorillas, do you still feel that same level of excitement, or is it for you, are you just going to treat your patients, if I could call them?
I'd say visiting gorillas, for those who are only able to do it once, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, but it's really magical.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate that I've been able to visit them so many times, and I guess so have you with your work. I've visited them, I don't know how many times, hundreds of times.
Yeah.
But every single time, it's like a wonderful experience. I'm seeing something new. I'm learning something new.
Yeah.
And it always feels like it's exciting all the time. I mean, sometimes you can get to the gorillas and they're in the trees. They only come down for a short time. Other times they're just there on the ground. And for me, what's also very nice for me is that I've seen them growing. Like I've seen babies become big silverbacks who head groups.
Yeah. I
come back and go, oh, wow, Kanyoni is really grown. Or, so-and-so has really grown. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
And then eventually they become the silverback. So for me, what makes it very interesting as well is following their family histories. Then you realize, oh, where's this gorilla? Nyampazi is now transferred from Mubare to Shegura, or now she's gone back to Mubare. And that's the group dynamics.
Yeah.
Even sometimes you can visit gorillas in the southern sector of Bwindi, and you see a gorilla that normally is supposed to be in the northern sector. So say, oh yes, they interacted in the forest. And when they interacted, this female gorilla left and she went to Nkuringo Gorilla Group. And so we get to understand their lives through all of that, which also makes it exciting. Okay. About 2 weeks ago, I was with the gorillas, and this time round we saw a female carrying her baby. The baby was just a couple of months old, and she was just able to move around with the baby. I got some good video. Yeah. She was mainly in the trees. And a month before that, there was another female 2 months before that, there's a female I had seen, Nyampazi. They call her Nyampazi because she likes eating ants. They met the day that I think she was born, they were eating a lot of ants. Yeah. So they called her Nyampazi, which means ants in Ruchiga. So that day I saw her, she was just, looking calm. Didn't look pregnant, actually. Only looked slightly different. A month later, she had a baby. Went to see her, she now had a baby.
Wow.
And the baby was quite big for that age, just a few weeks old, showing off the baby to everyone. Normally they hide them. And she's not a very young female. Yeah. But it's nice to see all those family histories. Okay. But yeah, it's really special. Sometimes you see the silverback is looking after the baby. If the mother has moved away, you always see some kinds of behaviors. Yeah. But I know that when the babies are playing, it's fun. It reminds me of my 2 sons.
Of your 2 sons, yeah.
Yeah, when they were playing, when they were little. Yeah. They like to play. They like to play like children and to show off in front of the tourists or visitors. And they're curious. Yeah. And all of those behaviors keep remaining and keep moving on to the next generations. Okay. The only issue now is that when I first went out, gorillas would really keep away from people. They wouldn't get close. But now they're getting too close. Yeah. They're too habituated. Because those which were babies have grown up seeing humans all their lives, so they're used to just going towards humans to check them out. Whereas before, it wasn't the case. Yeah. So which isn't good for them because we can easily make them sick.
Yeah. And I think we're going to have a chat about whether tourism is negatively impacting gorillas or gorilla conservation. I think that will be something that I'd like to pick your mind on later on. But I'd like to give you a bit of a background of how I got to learn about you. So many years back, I used to work as a safari planner with Wild Places Africa and the Uganda Safari Company. Okay. The guys that run a number of beautiful lodge properties, including Clouds in Nkuringo. And in that office, I used to get quite a number of requests from clients. And a couple of them wanted to track gorillas with a Dr. Gladys. And I always wondered, who was this Dr. Gladys? And then over the years, we've met at conferences. We've engaged a bit online. So that's how I got introduced to your story. And since then, I've been really inspired and really glued to it. But the question I'd like to ask is, do you still go out to track the gorillas with clients, or are your trips to the forest usually, if I could call it a forest ambulance to work on the mountain gorillas?
I would say the Wild Places are good friends of ours. Yeah. I've known them even when I was working in Uganda Wildlife Authority. Yeah. I think we did a film with Jonathan Wright for Canadian TV. Yeah. I would say that I still take people to the gorillas if they would like to. Okay. In fact, I'm going to be doing something like that in September with a client. But yes, I still do it from time to time. We do have a team who can also take them as well. We have some of our staff are based at Bwindi. We have wildlife health technicians who visit all the different gorilla groups every month to collect fecal samples and test them for parasites or any other emerging issues we want to look at, like bacteria, viruses. We're about to start a stress hormone study with a young vet who started working with us this year as officially, Dr. Gloria. Last year she came as an intern. And she's going to be leading a study because we want to see whether tourism or human-wildlife conflict are stressing out the gorillas and how to minimize it.
Okay.
And so that's going to be a very important study.
Yeah.
But I still do.
You still do. Cool. So last year, I think at the beginning of the last year, I got the opportunity to track with one of you guys, a doctor, and I was so fascinated at how meticulous you guys are with the work that you do in treating the mountain gorillas and checking on them from time to time. And a friend of mine who is a photographer in Spain, when he heard that I had an interview with you, he asked that I ask you, what challenges do you face as when you go out to treat the mountain gorillas? What can you maybe help us paint an image of what usually are the challenges that you face?
Treating mountain gorillas is tricky.
Yeah.
Because unlike other wild animals, they're very intelligent. Mountain gorillas and chimpanzees are very, very intelligent. We share over 98% genetic material. And so they you have to trick them. They know what you're doing. They know you're doing something funny. And because they live in a group, like gorillas live in a family, the silverback is the person, the main gorilla you have to worry about. And so when you get to the group, you have to first identify where the silverback is before you do any intervention. And then the moment you start the intervention, once the particular animal is darted, the one that's sick, you have to form a tent around the animal, and people have to chase away the silverback because of course he's going to come and attack because he wants to protect his young one. And that is always the part where you need to have brave trackers and brave rangers. Otherwise, you won't be able to do what you want to do. So after you've finished everything you've done, the next problem is returning the particular family member back
to the family.
Because that, again, he can attack you. So you have to kind of follow the group. Normally, they would have moved on for a bit. You have to carefully carry the baby or herd the baby or, the young gorilla towards the group and then move away slowly. No running, because the moment you run, they think you're trying to do something bad and they'll bite the nearest person. It may not even be the person who ran away first, but the nearest person. And so, you're dealing with very intelligent animals. So I know that sometimes when you dart them, they'll sniff the dart, look at it, and stare at you. I'm like, what are you trying to do? Whereas other wild animals, like if it's buffalo or other animals, giraffes, you dart one, they all run away.
They just run off,
And in fact, if you come back the next day, the one that you darted is the one that will be standing there. So that's why we have to tag them.
Waiting to be darted again.
Exactly. Whereas with gorillas, it's a psychological thing. And it's really emotionally disturbing for them. That's why it's minimized a lot. It's not yet been seen ethical just to say we're going to dart gorillas just to get blood samples to see what they have. Because they're so few in number, but you only intervene if it's human-related or life-threatening.
Okay. I'm going to come back to the gorillas in a bit, but just a few days ago, I saw that you won yet another award. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'm interested in knowing, as a woman in conservation, but also an African leader in conservation, what has it been like for you? Has it been, if I could call it, a smooth sail, or have there been some challenges?
I would say that it's harder for women because it's a male-dominated profession, conservation. Women are not expected to go out in the remote areas under difficult living conditions and live there. They're not supposed to be following dangerous wild animals, because sometimes you have to run, sometimes you get charged. I've even had to climb trees at some point, I've had to run, I've been chased by an elephant, I've been charged by gorillas. I've had to climb trees when there were buffalo on the ground. I've had to do all those things. And those are considered things that men normally do, not women. And so even when I first started out, there were no female rangers in Uganda Wildlife Authority, Uganda National Parks, which then became Uganda Wildlife Authority. But I'm glad that now 20% of the rangers are female. And that's really encouraging. And more female rangers are coming up. And because when they see role models, I've been inspired by Dr. Jane Goodall, who wrote the foreword for Walking with Gorillas, which I'm truly honored.
Yeah.
I've been inspired by the late Dr. Diane Fossey, who was the first person to do a long-term study on mountain gorillas, although I never got to meet her because she was murdered before I got into conservation when I was a teenager. And also Dr. Birite Gaudikas, who is the third trimate of Professor Louis Leakey, who studied orangutans. I've met her a couple of times. We were both finalists from the Indianapolis Prize for the Animal Conservation last year.
Yeah.
So I really got to spend a lot of time with her at that time. She's a very lovely lady.
Yeah.
And so those three ladies have always inspired me. In fact, when I met Dr. Birite Gaudikas as a vet student in London, she wrote in the book I bought from her, "Follow your dreams and the rest will follow." And with Jane Goodall, when I met Dr. Jane Goodall as a vet student, I went with my sister the first time round. Said, "Come with me." She was studying in London, doing an MBA in London Business School.
Yeah.
And I said, "There's this lady who studied chimpanzees. She's giving a talk. Can you come with me?" So I went with her, and Jane Goodall was very happy to see me. I was the only African. Me and my sister were the only Africans in the whole room in London. And she said, "Come and visit me in Gombe." And so ever since then, I started attending many of her talks.
Yeah.
And so she's been following my career from when I was 23 years old, when I was a vet student. So I've been really inspired by those people, which has helped me to continue with what I want to do, knowing that there are other women out there who are out there, who are pioneers in their field.
Yeah.
And more so, not only are they pioneers, but they also happen to be women.
Yeah.
So that has been very great for me. But I would say that often women have to work twice as hard to be taken seriously in the conservation field. And actually, I write a chapter called Women in Conservation, which both my agent, my book agent, literary agent, and the editor, who's female, both Naz Hassan and Lily Golden, who's the editor from Skyhorse Publishing, are women.
Wow.
And they really felt that I needed that chapter in the book because I had too many chapters. They had to reduce them.
Yeah.
But that one, they said, is very important for women in conservation. And that was one of the most difficult chapters to write because I had to allow myself to be a lot more vulnerable to all the various times that I had to recollect or come to terms with many of the times that I've been put down as a woman, in conservation.
Okay.
Or my abilities being doubted because I'm a woman in conservation. And so that was quite hard to write, but I think it was very important because a lot of women face similar challenges.
Yeah. What would be your message to little girls out there that I guess look up to you and would be hoping to be Gladys, like a version of yourself or a version of their own, maybe take their own journey in conservation as well in the future? What would be your message to them? And also, as you respond to that, I'd like to also know, how do we get more girls, more women into conservation? Of course, you've talked about the percentage growing to 20%, which is better than it was back then, but it's still not balancing, if I could say. What would be your thoughts on that?
I would say that it's still very important to have women in conservation. But what I would say about that is, just like Dr. Birite said to me, follow your dream and the rest will follow. Yeah. A lot of women are under pressure as soon as they finish university. They should get married, have children, fit into the society norms. And sometimes when you're going to do those kind of professions, it doesn't allow you to do that straight away.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people give up. They just follow what society expects them to do. And so they have to be willing to challenge society norms, cultural norms, to go out there to do what they want to do and not get discouraged. If they really feel they want to be out there in the wild with wildlife or living in remote areas, they shouldn't allow anyone to discourage them.
Yeah.
If they have to handle dangerous wild animals, they shouldn't allow anyone to discourage them. Because I know that there's a certain woman, very dynamic woman, who I admire. She's Ugandan. And she said to me that when she met me finally, through National Geographic, because we're both National Geographic explorers, and they had a women in conservation retreat. Yeah. She said to me, I'm so glad I finally met you in person to really talk. Because she said in those early days when you were setting up the veterinary unit in Uganda Wildlife Authority, some of the men doubted your abilities, and they'll talk about me in front of her.
Oh.
And they'll think, who does she think she is? Does she think she can manage to move animals, treat animals? Because it had never been done in Uganda to treat animals. And everyone, there were the cynics who thought you should just leave wildlife on its own.
Yeah.
But then they're thinking, but should it also be a woman doing this? Because they saw that it was a very difficult thing to do, and it was not normal. And she said, but I'm glad you proved them wrong. You managed to do all these things and show them the value of animal welfare and, championing a new approach to conservation, where we improve the health of people and animals together to promote conservation. So she was really excited that I had proven them wrong. And when I look back, I thought if they had shown me that they doubt my abilities that time, I would have been very discouraged. But they were very polite when they would see me. They wouldn't show anything. And because I had a unique skill I was bringing to the table, so they were like, hey, we need animals to be moved. Could you plan that? When we did it successfully, could you write a policy on translocation and reintroduction? Or could you write a policy, could you add veterinary component to the policy on problem animal control in Uganda, animals that go into people's gardens and need to be moved. And so they always showed me a lot of respect, but they never told me to my face that they doubted my abilities. And so I'm really glad that they didn't, because if they had, I think it would have discouraged me a lot. And so what I tell young women is try and be with people who are positive. There'll always be people who believe in you and those who doubt you. Gravitate more towards those who believe in you, because you still need to build up your confidence. And those who doubt you, they'll always be there. But if they do, you should be able to speak up and challenge them. And eventually they'll realize that you're really serious. And I'm very glad that we have a female vet, Dr. Gloria Duku, on our team. She's doing wonderful work, and she was inspired by me. When she was in Makerere Vet School, her and her colleagues used to hear about me, because they'd say, oh, there's a wildlife vet who's a female. She was the first wildlife vet, and she happened to be female. You need to link up with her and get to meet her one day. So it was great when I met them, when we did a study together with Wildlife Authority and Ministry of Agriculture and Uganda Virus Research Institute, looking at diseases shared by people, wildlife, and livestock. And it was a proposal that we wrote together. In this profession, you have to write a lot of proposals. So I was one of the main grant writers. And we got funding from the International Development Research Center in Canada. And so when we got this funding, I went into the field with my team. We had a male vet as well, also very motivated, highly motivated, Dr. Mark Kokot. So he came from our team, and Dr. Gloria was an intern with the Wildlife Authority together with another vet and some vet technicians. So that's when I first met them in the field. And after that, she eventually came and did an internship with us, and now she's with us. So I'm glad that there are more female wildlife vets coming up. It's still I would say maybe 20%, still the same ratio of female wildlife vets to total wildlife vets in Uganda. But it's not only in Uganda, all over the world. There's many more male wildlife vets than female wildlife vets. And as far as rangers goes, it's still a bit like that. But there are initiatives in Southern Africa where you have female, they're called the Black Mambas. All of them are females, female rangers.
Quite an interesting name.
I know. And there's a lady called Holly who started Female Ranger Week. So I'm one of her ambassadors.
Oh, nice.
Trying to raise the awareness about the wild female rangers in the wild.
I think I saw
I'm
that.
proud to be one of her ambassadors.
I think I saw that going around on the internet just a few weeks. Was it a few weeks ago?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. When you talked about Dr. Jen Goodall, Dr. Diane Fossey, and I always forget the lady that worked on the orangutans. Yes, Galdicus. I've always thought that you share your stories. Of course, you're inspired by them, but your story is so kind of similar to them. Of course, you're all ladies, but I also find it interesting that you all kind of started your journey in a small cabin at the edge of a forest. For your case, it was that little tent that you talked about earlier. And all of you have written books. Of course, you recently launched Walking with the Gorillas, which I enjoyed reading. I thought I knew you, but I think reading your book, I got to really understand the challenges, but also get a feel of this really beautiful journey that you've walked so far and continue to walk. I'd like to, however, know whether you are inspired by any men, because I do read that some of the earlier work around gorillas was actually done as early as the 1950s by a gentleman whose name I always forget. I don't know if you
George Shala.
Yes, George Shala. Have you been inspired by any men along the journey?
I have, because our journeys have had a lot of men.
Yeah.
And some of them have been so supportive.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you enjoyed reading Walking with Gorillas. I would say that Dr. George Shala I met early on in my career.
Yeah.
When I didn't actually meet him in person, but I communicated with him.
Yeah.
So after I came back from Bwindi, I wrote a report about my time with the gorillas. And when I was in Bwindi, I read Gorillas in the Mist by Dr. Diane Fossey. And I also read a book that Dr. George Shala had written about working with gorillas in those early years and his first encounter in Bwindi. So then when I wrote that report, I felt I would like to share it with Professor George Shala, just to see what his comments are. So I did share it with him. I sent it to him snail mail to New York, where he's working at the Bronx Zoo, New York Zoological Society. And I said to him, I've just spent a whole month with the mountain gorillas. The Bwindi gorillas have just been habituated, and I spent a whole month with them. And I read that you visited that forest in the 50s. And he was so excited. He handwrote back to me and said, "It's so great you got to see them. Thank you for your report. I want to introduce you to the head wildlife vet we have here, Dr. Billy Karish. He was the first wildlife vet for the Wildlife Conservation Society, and among the first vets in America who would go around the world treating wild animals as part of the work of Wildlife Conservation Society. So Dr. Billy Karish himself wrote a book called Appointments at the End of the Earth, which I read when I was working at UA. So Billy Karish wrote to me, and it was such an encouraging message. So he's been somebody who I've really looked up to, and he's always been very supportive of our work. His endorsement was supposed to be on the book jacket, but he was so busy working that it ended up being on the internet. And there have been a number of other male vets. There's also Dr. Richard Koch, who helped me out a lot with setting up the veterinary unit. He had the ability to just throw in the deep end, because he thinks that's the best way to learn. So when we're translocating elephants in Kenya, I went to learn how to translocate elephants when we had a problem in elephants destroying people's crops in Mubende. And we had to move them to either Queen Elizabeth National Park or Murchison Falls National Park. So I first went to Kenya for training. And I remember that first elephant that was darted, Dr. Koch just left me at the elephant, and then he was dropping a vet per elephant.
Oh, no.
And I was the youngest on the team, because the KWS vets I think there were 4 of them, 1 woman and 3 men, and he was dropping a vet per team. But this first elephant being the first one, everybody came to the first elephant, the media, the range. There were many people there, even those who were not necessarily going to help with the elephant. They were there. And this elephant, and everybody was concerned that they could die because they had had a problem a few months earlier when they were translocating elephants and during the wet season, and they had diarrhea. So they thought, he just told me, here's the drug if the elephant looks like it wants to die. This is the drug for waking up the elephant. But he left me the vet box.
For you to work it out.
So now, the elephant put up his head.
Oh.
This is a big elephant, a female. She ended up being the matriarch. She put up her head, 5 ton. I was like, what? Everybody looked at me. Because in my hand, I had the drug for making her wake up if she's beginning to stop breathing. So I had to look quickly in the box for the drug to make her sleep again. Everyone is looking at me. And this is so early on in my career. Like, I'd only been working for a few months.
It's properly working under pressure.
And then I finally got I found the drug. And then I had to work out how much to give. And I thought, how much do I give? So I thought, okay, I'm just going to give half the dose that the elephant received. I had to quickly put it in the ear vein as the capture warden, Mr. Kiniji, held the elephant's head down, because now the elephant was ready to move. And I said, if this elephant gets up and walks away, I'll look so dumb. I'd be so embarrassing. So I was quickly able to put it in the vein, and she went back to sleep again. Then he came back to me like half an hour later and said, how was it? I heard that the the elephant almost walked away. And I said, yeah.
Yeah.
So where were you? I mean, I was like, you should have come and helped me. Then he's like, no, it's good. I heard you. Well done. You managed it.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, that's how you learn. I'm like, that's a very steep learning curve.
Yeah.
But that's the only way, because when we're moving elephants from Mubende to Queen Elizabeth, there was no veterinarian with me. That day I happened to no veterinary doctor could join me from Kenya, and I had to do it myself. And that was very challenging. But because I had been thrown in the deep end in Kenya, I'd learned to own it, take charge. So when I had to do it by myself, it was easier to do it. So there've been a lot of male mentors, but I have to talk about a primatologist, male mentor, who has been like a father to me, Professor Vernon Reynolds. He gave me an opportunity to first study primates in the wild, which was chimpanzees in Budongo Forest. When he gave a talk in London Zoo, and I went up to him, showing him, I had spent a week at Entebbe Zoo looking after orphan chimpanzees, supported by Goodall Institute. So he said, and I said, when I still couldn't go to study gorillas then, because they're not yet habituated for tourism in Bwindi, in tourism site, he said, come to Budongo. And so he's always been mentoring me from that time, taught me how to write a scientific report, taught me so many things. And all my life he's been a mentor and an advisor, and up to now he still is. And so, there've been many people who have been very supportive, and he has. He's been among those who have encouraged me when others were discouraging me. So, he's a very famous primatologist. He was the first person to study chimpanzees in Uganda in the 1960s. And he went out the same time as Dr. Jane Goodall. But he got a grant from Royal Geographic Society, and Dr. Jane Goodall got a grant from National Geographic Society. And his grant ran out before hers. So he went and became a professor in Oxford, and he came with his wife, Frankie Reynolds, who sadly passed away a couple of weeks ago, which is very sad, because they've been companions for so long. And she was also a very great supporter of my work and my mother's work as well. She encouraged my mom to write her book.
And we'll come and talk about your mother and your dad in a bit. But as you were talking about the translocations you did with the elephants and the work you've done with the chimpanzees, most people listening in might not know. Of course, some of us know because we've read the book. But most people know you as the gorilla lady, if I could say. But you've done work, as you've already told us, around other species. The chimpanzees did stand out for me because just a few months ago we were in Chambura filming an episode called Lost Chimpanzees of Chambura, and they are quite so interesting characters. Like all of them, they bang the trees, they make these interesting pant hoods. It's such a show when you are down there. I'd like to know, do you still do any work with any other species right now apart from the mountain gorillas?
Yes, we do. We do other work with other species. We, being a wildlife veterinarian, I should be able to treat any animal, and I still do, even the regular domestic dogs and cats. Recently, our vet, Dr. Gloria, went to assist at the Ngamba Chimpanzee Island Sanctuary when they were doing the annual health checks. My namesake Kalema is there because I rescued him near Budongo Forest, and he's one of the alpha males, but second in command. And I would say the most handsome. Not because I rescued him. He's the calmest and most handsome chimp there. So yes, we still do work with chimpanzees if we're called upon. Shambura Gorge is really beautiful. I say it's not always easy to see the chimpanzees there, but when you get to see them, it's really nice. They're different from the others because they're stuck kind of in a gorge. They're not like Budongo where you see so many, because there are about over 500 in Budongo Forest and over 1,000 in Kibale National Park. In Shambura, it's a bit different because they now need to connect with another group of chimpanzees, another community further ahead, I think from the forest reserve, and they're really stuck there. So they're really struggling. But they're very intelligent animals, and it's sad that they're kind of stuck there. I think the best thing to do is get a corridor to connect them to the forest reserve.
To other
I know that
forests.
Volcano Safaris has done a lot of work there. They have a lodge, and they take people to see the chimpanzees there.
Yeah.
The Wildlife Authority also do. When I was working in UA, we used to sometimes go and check on them down there. They're very special, and I think they also need a lot of support.
Yeah.
And the community around also needs a lot of support so they can coexist with these chimpanzees.
Yeah.
But I think the best thing for them is to connect them to the other ones and create a corridor.
Great. Yeah.
And whether people are willing to move away for that corridor to happen requires a lot of community sensitization, awareness, and ownership
Yeah.
of these chimpanzees. So
Yeah.
that's still quite a lot of work to be done by
Yeah.
the local partners in the area.
Yeah.
We also sometimes collect, as I mentioned, we collect samples from other savanna species to look at diseases that they could be sharing with livestock, which could go to people like brucellosis, Rift Valley fever, buffalo, zebras, waterbuck,
Okay.
Uganda kob, all kinds of species, warthogs. So we still continue to sometimes work with these other species from time to time
Yeah.
in the
Nice.
various national parks.
Nice. Fantastic. When I was reading your book, I also did realize that the giraffes in Kidepo, you have a hand in that. And every time I get to film them, I'm excited. I didn't know that until I read the book, I didn't know that you were responsible for bringing in, was it 4 or 5 from Kenya?
We brought in 3 giraffes from
giraffes.
Kenya.
Yeah.
Kidepo was down to 1 female
Yeah.
and 5 males. So if anything happened to that female, it would be the end of giraffes in Kidepo. So
Yeah.
one of the first assignments I was given by Dr. Edroma, another person who I really admire, and he made the difference for my life, because he took me on as a young female vet doctor and said, I want you to come. Because I wrote to him and I said, this is what a vet does after Bwindi. You need a vet. I've spent a month in Bwindi. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. This is what a wildlife vet does. Can you hire me as your first wildlife vet? And he did.
Yeah.
He took a chance on me. Although he got a criticism from people saying, how can you hire someone like that? She's a young vet fresh out of university. She's a woman. He said, no, she's determined. I know she'll be able to help us. And he did. He was very, 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 very supportive from day one. He's one of the most supportive people in my career. And so Dr. Droma, because he believed in me so much, he said, I want you to move elephants. I'm like, whoa. I've been used to moving cats and dogs, but 5-ton animals. And so I got training in Kenya Wildlife Service. Then the giraffes, we found out that they had too many in Lake Nakuru. They were debarking all the trees, and Kidepo had too few. So then we had to arrange. We couldn't bring them from Murchison because there were a lot of corny rebels in that area, and they also had a skin disease, which is also one of the first cases I had to look at. So the safest was Kenya, where they also want to get rid of them. So we organized with Peter Muller, who was a warden engineer in Kidepo. He raised the money from Frankfurt Zoological Society, and it was a big operation to move these 3 giraffes. Wanted to bring about 5 or 6. The letter actually gave permission to bring 6 giraffes. But when we went to Kenya, there were very few young giraffes that could fly in a military Hercules standing, because they had to fly standing when they're wide awake. Because it's a long journey. Giraffes can't stay down for a long time, unlike elephants. Giraffes have to be reversed within 30 minutes. Otherwise, you lose them. So we had to fly them standing. After they were darted and reversed, put in a boma for some weeks. They get used to people. We had to then put them within their crates into the military Hercules aeroplane. And so there were only 3 that were small enough, below 3 meters in height. And they were only between the ages of 9 months to 1 year. Can you imagine?
Wow.
They were still very young. So we flew them to Kidepo, and we could only find 2 females and 1 male. So I named the female Nakuru, Kenya, and Hercules. So when we got there, and we released them with a very, very warm welcome from the park staff. The chief warden was Angelo Ajoka. It was actually all filmed by BBC.
Wow.
All of it. So
Is this still somewhere that we can find it and watch it?
Very much so.
Okay,
you can. Very much so. You
Yeah.
can find it. And when we got there and we released them, they were the big female that was older was the most nervous all through the journey. So she collapsed and I had to put her head up and everything, because now I was no longer with the Kenya Wildlife Service vets.
Yeah.
The head vet at the last moment said he forgot his passport.
Oh no.
I don't know if it was deliberate or not, but he
Yeah.
was not able to accompany me to Uganda.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be by myself. So I was by myself in the Hercules with 2 rangers I brought from Kidepo and Peter Muller.
Yeah.
So when we got there, we released them. They stayed in the boma for 6 weeks. Then afterwards, they drove the other 6 giraffes to meet these 3.
Mm.
And they met them, and because they were babies, they accepted them. And that was really beautiful. They joined the wild herd.
Yeah.
Sadly, 6 weeks later, Hercules got eaten by a lion.
Oh no. Okay.
Very
Well,
expensive meal.
Yeah.
I was very upset when I heard it, but luckily he was male, because we needed females.
Yeah.
And then a few weeks after that, they called me and said that the adult female is having difficulties. Looks like she's trying to give birth,
Mm.
and she's having difficulties. So we flew to Kidepo. It was very dangerous to drive. So we flew, and when we got there, we found that she had just died, giving birth to a baby girl.
Oh.
Can you imagine? So we lost her. But then those 2 females who remained from Kenya,
Yeah.
they really bred with the males. It's not a regular 2 females and more males,
Yeah.
but they bred and bred and bred. So when I went back as a board member of Uganda Wildlife Authority in 2012, 15 years after the translocation, they showed me where the giraffes were. They had risen to over 35.
Wow.
I was so excited.
Yeah.
So excited. And some of those rangers, the 2 rangers were still there.
Oh.
They were now senior. One of them was now working for Wild Places, actually, at the
Yeah.
lodge. And he was so happy to see me.
Yeah.
And because during that time, there was a book where I was a co-author called Gladys, working as a wildlife vet.
Mm.
I even gave him a copy of the book because he was inside there, his photograph. He was so happy.
Yeah.
Because they took when we were moving the giraffes. And then later on, they moved some giraffes from Murchison, and they went up to over 50. So I can say that single translocation of just 2 females in the end that survived brought the giraffes in Kidepo back from the brink of extinction. So because even at that time, people were like, why should you remove animals, etc.? It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But that showed the value of translocation.
Yeah.
Once you provide them safety, once they're there, then it's fine.
Yeah.
So giraffe, I think, are one of my favorite savanna species, I have to say.
I love them as well.
They're very graceful.
Yeah. I'll come back to a question on a type of conservation that I think my engagement with quite a number of people at the Wildlife Authority is they want a type of conservation that is a no-touch, like let nature fend for itself. And I think as someone who is, I guess the work that you do involves really engaging a lot with the wildlife and helping it survive, if I could use that as a phrase. I'll want to pick your mind on that later on, but let me just come back home a bit and ask, your dad is or was a very celebrated politician.
Yes.
And and so is your mom as well. I'd like to know, did the journey or the first steps they took, did those inspire you in any way to become a leader in your own discipline? Not really a politician, but a leader in conservation. Did they inspire you in any way?
They did. My dad, who sadly I don't remember because he died when I was 2 years old, was one of the first ministers in Uganda, in the first government after independence, when Uganda attained independence in 1962.
Yeah.
Prior to that, he had been in the Buganda government, and then he was made a minister under Obote I. And so he did a lot for the country, and because he was a minister of works and housing works and communications, they always used to President Obote always used to send him to lead goodwill missions. He used to like sending him. So he went to India, he went to China, all these places. They went to the Far East during that time, because having gained independence from the British, they wanted to now go to the East and the eastern side of the world to seek support. So I remember the late Honorable Etiang told me how when we were opening a certain road where my dad and mom built a house in Muyenga. It was the first house built there in those days. So they finally named it after my dad, William Kalema Drive. So when they're opening that drive, I learned so much about him because Honorable Etiang said he was in the delegation that my dad led. They went to different places, but he said he used to like shopping for Uganda. Yeah. So they went to China, shopped for Mandela Stadium. It was supposed to be given for free. But then when we had so many other government changes, now it became a loan to Uganda because it's going to be the first stadium that China built in Africa. Yeah. They shopped for so many things. Soroti meat packers from different places, Busetema rice scheme from Yugoslavia. It was really nice. So when we celebrated 50 years remembering him, 50 years since he disappeared, he was one of the first victims killed by Idi Amin when Idi Amin came into power. I compiled this booklet, and that was my contribution. I said I'm going to compile the booklet. I didn't get involved in the event, but that was my contribution. And so this booklet talks about his life, and I learned more compiling this booklet than I'd learned all these years since he died. Wow. I learned so much about him. Going to the Far East, heading the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, and so many things that he did. And so he's a very special person. But when I found out later in life that, you had a father, but he was killed by Idi Amin, as a child when I grew up and asked, do I have a dad? Yes. Where is he? They said he was killed by Idi Amin. I felt strongly that I wanted to continue his legacy of a prosperous Uganda, but through my passion for wildlife. And so I did. And my mom, actually, she's somebody who also got influenced to join politics because of my dad. So both her and him, they joined Uganda People's Congress, UPC, in those early days of the 60s. And when he was killed, obviously, she had to go down, she didn't get involved in politics at all. But when President Museveni came into power, she said she wanted to now join politics to continue his legacy. So she did, and she was one of the first female politicians in Uganda. And she eventually wrote her autobiography in 2021 nice. About her life, growing up in Uganda, Uganda as a Muganda woman, and going to King's College Budo, which was a male-dominated school, but her dad felt he wanted to take his girls there. It was primarily boys. And she talks about all that she's been through as one of the first female politicians and encouraging other women to go through, to become politicians in their area, which has really helped. Because of her and others like Honorable Miriam Entebbe and Honorable Winnie Byanyima, when she was in Parliament in those days, they advocated for an extra female seat in Parliament. So actually Winnie Byanyima actually wrote an endorsement on her book.
Oh, nice. So, and
they gave her an award very early on when I was at OR, I remember, from Forwade, Forum for Women in Democracy. She got the first Forwade award in Uganda. Wow. So she's been a great inspiration. She's always allowed me to do what I want to do. And so when I wanted to work with animals, she was like, no, let her do what she wants. Even if it doesn't earn a lot of money, when I leave this world, I want her to feel that she did what she wants to do, and she's passionate about what she wants to do. So I was very lucky that she wasn't one of those parents who force you into this, that, or the other. They were like, why don't you do human medicine? Because if you want to treat animals, you might as well treat people. I'm like, I hate seeing animals suffering. I don't get energized when I go to Mulago Hospital. I get depressed with all those sick people around, but I want to help animals. And so my mom really understood it because she saw the passion when I was a child. When any of our dogs got sick or cats, I would miss school until and I would go with her to the vets in Wandegea. And yet I was a kid who liked school. So she's always encouraged me. But when it came to the gorillas, she was a bit concerned.
I can imagine. I think it's good. It's always good to have that supportive parent. Of course, I know unfortunately, your dad, you didn't get to see him. But I think your mother, just hearing you speak, it's always nice to have, really a supporting parent, especially when you are pioneering and really going into a journey that no one else has taken. I don't know if that was because you were the youngest of 6, so you got all the love. But I think really that it's kudos to her for having, let you fly your wings, and here we are now, just listening to your beautiful story. If I could remember, when I was reading your book, I read that you led your mother to her first gorilla trek. But one thing that really stood out for me, and of course not to give away too much for those that have not read the book, is that she tracked the gorillas in quite unique fashion in a skirt, which I tried to envision. Was quite interesting. Was that for you your Mama I Made It moment, where you got to bring her into the forest, your workplace? Would you say that was that moment where you were so proud?
Yes, yeah. I'd really say, because my mom, really supports me, so she tries to get involved in my work. She's a hands-on mother. Yeah. Also a hands-on grandmother, actually, when we had children. All her grandchildren are very, very close to Jaja, because she's a hands-on mother and a hands-on grandmother. And so when we went to, she didn't want me to study the gorillas. She said, I can't allow you to go to the gorillas. They will kill you or maul you. I said no, because King Kong gives them a bad name, Hollywood, all of that. But then eventually, Mary Klopper, who's another lady who's really supported me, convinced my mom that no, she'll be fine. So when I finally got to study the gorillas, and then I was finishing my time at UWA, I had got an opportunity now to go abroad and do a zoo medicine residency. And so I felt like maybe I should bring Mama to the gorillas, because she was beginning to start having health issues. So I said, let me bring her to them before she's not able to visit them, because she can't hike those hills. So I brought her to the gorillas. She was with my aunt, Mrs. Auntie Rita Chiwana, and her sister-in-law. And so when we were going to the gorillas, I asked my mom what she's going to wear. She just said she was wearing a skirt. Yeah. Said, you don't have trousers? She goes, no. I said, My Auntie Rita had trousers at least. Yeah. So yes, she tracked gorillas in a skirt, and the people, they took us to the nearest group. Yeah. And everybody walked extra slowly to make sure she makes it. And people who were digging tea in the fields on the way to the gorillas were fascinated to see her with us. Yeah. They were saying, hey, Mukeikuru, old lady, what are you doing going to see the gorillas? They had never seen an old African woman going to visit gorillas, an elderly African woman. Yeah. And they were so excited to see her. So after when we went to the gorillas, she's like, they're just gentle vegetarians living in a big salad bowl. Just getting, and she was really charmed by them. Yeah. Of course, my sister and brother, who, when they went to visit, they were 4 hours away. They said, I think you brought the gorilla especially close for her. How come us, we had to walk so far? Yeah. My brother, Dr. William Kalema, my sister, Dr. Veronica Kalema. But anyway, when we got back to the camp, the women brought their crafts. They were so excited to see her that they came. They'd never, ever come to me like that. But they came and brought their crafts. They wanted to talk to her. They thought they wanted to talk to someone like her and talk to her about their lives and their challenges. They were so welcoming. So that was very special to see. Yeah. They really wanted to meet her, the local communities. And later on, of course, I started to work very closely with them. Yeah. But it was really nice that they warmed up to her, having seen her walking with me to the forest. Yeah. Yeah, nice. And the rangers, everybody was walking extra slowly, even the tourists. Yeah. They were like, this is a very important person. She's the mother of Dr. Gladys. Let's make sure she gets to see the gorillas. They were only about 45 minutes away. Well,
nice. I like that you are getting your little boys into the thick of things already. And one thing that I also find interesting each time I listen to your story is that you learned child spacing from the mountain gorillas, which is quite intriguing for me. I'd like to know, are there any other lessons that we can learn from mountain gorillas as you learned child spacing?
I learned child spacing from them. They have a baby once every 4.5 years. Yeah. By the time they have the second child, the older one is old enough to build his own nest and help to babysit the younger one, which is very logical. Yeah. And also they're not emotionally as dependent on the parent. They have different emotional needs. And I think with human beings it's exactly the same. So when Tendo was born, 4.5 years after Indigo could even carry his baby brother, play with him. It was a different emotional need.
Yeah.
And I think that was really, I learned that from the gorillas. And the chimpanzees, actually.
Yeah.
They're also the same. I've learned so much. They're very good mothers, I have to say. They really look after their young ones for 4 years. They breastfeed for 3 years, exclusive breastfeeding.
Yeah.
So without modern contraceptive, they're able to, and that's what human beings should do. They're very motherly. They really look after their babies. So I've learned things like that, how to be a better mother from the gorillas.
Okay. Cool. So for anyone listening, you might hear some planes flying by. That's just because we're out here in Entebbe. You're not so far away from the airport. But thank you for joining us for this really insightful conversation on gorilla conservation and also this incredible journey that Dr. Gladys Kalema has walked. Now, Doctor, you've also led a number of celebrities to the gorillas. I did hear that you've led Her Royal Highness, the Queen Nabagereka of Buganda, to the gorillas. And I think I also heard that the gentleman that invented the World Wide Web as we know it, you guys led him there. I'd like to know why is it important that we get cultural leaders, celebrities, and if I could call them public figures, to pick interest in conservation, not just for the gorillas alone?
It was so exciting to take the Queen of Buganda, the Nabagereka, to the gorillas.
Yeah.
It ended up being that she was the first queen in the world to track the mountain gorillas.
Oh, wow.
And that was so exciting when we launched the programs. My husband is a founder member of Conservation Through Public Health, and we went together with him to convince her to become the patron. We met her in her office in Bulange.
Nice.
And she said that when I'm a patron of a charity, I always get involved. I don't want to just be a figurehead.
Yeah.
So when we were launching the programs, we invited her to Bwindi, and it was very, very exciting. And we felt that it got Ugandans to feel that gorilla trekking is not just an experience for foreigners, it's an experience for all of us. If the Queen of Buganda can go, so can the rest of the Baganda, so can the rest of the country.
Yeah.
And even when we were there, the Batwa, they really wanted to meet her. They told her they want to meet the Kabaka. They were just so excited to see her as a cultural leader. And the local LC5 chairperson and all of those, the RDC, Canon Ben Rulonga, they were so excited to see her. And that it raised the profile of gorilla trekking within Uganda and made people feel that this is for us.
Yeah.
It's not just for foreigners. We have to be proud of this heritage. Bringing Sir Tim Berners-Lee, it's actually my husband who led him to the gorillas, because my husband's a telecom specialist. Lawrence Zikusoka did his master's in telecom, and through his networks, he got to know about Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the World Wide Web, and convinced him to come to Uganda to visit the gorillas and support the telecommunication projects, because Lawrence helped to set up the telecenter at Bwindi, and we also set up one at Queen Elizabeth National Park. So the one at Bwindi kind of stopped when everyone now got phones and there was network. But when Sir Tim Berners-Lee came to Uganda, the Queen Elizabeth one was still there, and it still is. So he took him to Queen Elizabeth, then took him to Bwindi. And again, that raised the profile of why it's important to protect wildlife, because he has a huge network, even beyond our networks. So bringing public figures enables us to reach people outside the conservation community and get them to feel that it's important to visit these animals, protect them, protect wildlife. And so it's really, really important to bring such high-profile people to such places.
Okay, fantastic. Now, let's now talk about conservation through public health. I like that the idea of how this whole entity was to come together was hatched by a solution that the community offered, if I got that right.
Yes.
In one of the meetings that you had in one of the villages close to the mountain gorillas, the communities themselves stood up and told you what exactly they wanted. I'd like to know, as leader in conservation, as someone who has been in conservation for so many years, how do we get this model of allowing the communities to provide their solutions to the problems that our natural world faces, as opposed to bringing them in as stakeholders and consulting them, in quotes, if I could say? How do we get to learn from a model like yours to now ensure that all these other problems that we face all across the African continent, not just Uganda alone, can be solved in a similar fashion? Because I believe that the communities living next to these wild places where the wildlife roams naturally, I want to get the feeling that they know how to solve some of the challenges that we have. How do we get many more communities to, if I could say, take that leading seat to provide the solutions?
I would say that, yes, in the book I talked about, I did talk a lot about how I was shocked that the community knew what they wanted.
Yeah.
Because you tend up to be taught that these people are, these people are poor, so they don't really know what they need.
Yeah.
But when we have the health education workshops with the local communities, when everybody felt I should lead them, being the only vet in the organization, when people made gorillas sick, people gave gorillas scabies.
Yeah.
And the baby gorilla died, and we were able to treat the rest with ivermectin, and they got better. And everyone thought, we're going to get another scabies outbreak if we don't improve the health of the communities. So they asked me to lead health education workshops. Sure enough, we did get another scabies outbreak, but now we had started to engage them. And so when I told them what the problem was, how they got sick, I was about to tell them the solution because I'd already got it written down.
Yeah.
And the ranger touched my arm and said, let's hear what they have to say, the community conservation ranger. And they came up with much better suggestions than I was proposing for them. And I was like, wow. So a lot of them is what we used to start the NGO.
Yeah.
So in fact, this book is divided into a section on becoming a conservationist, then becoming a wildlife veterinarian, then One Health. That's when my One Health journey began, and then sustaining conservation. So all of that came about as a result of meeting with these communities.
Yeah.
It was a turning point in my life. They proposed how they can prevent gorillas getting sick. One of their main things they said is they want continuous health education. It shouldn't just be a one-off.
Yeah.
Then, about not openly defecating, covering rubbish heaps, not leaving dirty clothing around. That's how the gorillas got sick. Then they also said that they wanted to strengthen the human-gorilla conflict team that had gorillas back when they come out, the Hugos. And then they said that they also wanted health services to be brought closer to them.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I didn't realize they live so far away from the nearest health center.
Yeah.
So when I went to America to study, to do the master's and the zoo medicine residency, I had all of that in the back of my mind that, why don't we start an NGO that does just this?
Yeah.
And so even as we're engaging them, our organization yes, we have a staff of over 40 now, including the social enterprises, but we have 10 times as many community members we work with within Bwindi alone, just Bwindi Impenetrable National Park.
Yeah.
So we have like 430 village health and conservation team members, maybe over 20 community conservation animal health workers.
Yeah.
And we work so closely with these people. They're community volunteers, but they promote good health and hygiene. They promote family planning, where it's important to space your children, how to access contraceptives. They talk about sustainable agriculture, livelihoods, having a food crop garden. They talk about so many things, and how to access money from gorilla ecotourism and how to reduce human-wildlife conflict. So whenever homes are visited by gorillas and baboons and other wildlife, they alert the human-gorilla conflict team, the gorilla guardians, to herd them back. And we have, of them, 50% are women and 50% are men. Oh. I'm so glad that through our work, we're engaging women equitably, local communities equitably in conservation. Yeah. Both women and men. We bring about gender equality. It's not something that we planned out to do. We're not intentional about it. Yeah. But because healthcare is the domain of women and conservation is the domain of men, we're able to get half-half. We get men more involved in healthcare and family planning, and women more involved in conservation and natural resource management. Another approach, it's called a One Health approach, but it's also called population health environment. So that's been really exciting. And we have meetings with them, and we talk to them about issues. They keep proposing things. for example, they proposed how we can maintain them. We were going to hold another workshop. The first time we started to engage them with family planning, when USAID gave us funding through an organization in US, Camp Dresser Maki International, and we were about to give them more money for another workshop, and they said, we want livestock because we're volunteers and we want to keep doing this work. We don't get a salary. So luckily, our third founder member, Mr. Stephen Rubanga, kind of said to me that he had worked in Ministry of Agriculture for 20 years. He said, instead of giving them individual goats or cows, which they may or may not look after properly, depending on how good they are at farming, let's make it a group activity which brings them together. So it will be more sustainable, they're more likely to earn from it, and they will keep going. So we did. But they're the ones who proposed. So one group asked for goats, another group asked for cows. And we haven't had dropouts over the past, it's now coming to 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah, since we started in 2007.
Yeah.
Over the past 17 years, we've not had dropouts. And so this is for that particular group. And it keeps growing and growing.
Yeah.
So that's something that we're very excited about. And we continue to make sure that with communities, don't impose your ideas on them. You can talk to them about the problems, but it's very important that they come up with a solution.
Yeah.
Because then they'll own it.
Yeah.
And normally they know better, they have a better solutions than what you're proposing for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We always think that we have all the answers to every every problem, and I think, as you say, it's always nice that the people that are most affected by living around these wild spaces be the ones to offer the solutions to the problems. Yeah.
But one thing I've also enjoyed is that when we went out to do the health education workshops, I was leading the team because I developed all the brochures with a designer in Kampala. I was the team leader, bringing the information. That time it was a One Health team. It wasn't coined One Health yet, but they had a veterinarian, community conservation ranger and warden, more like social scientists and conservationists. And we also had a public health person, the sub-county health assistant, Robert Sajabi. So when we went there, the ranger said to me, hey, women are whispering in Ruchiga. You have to educate their girl child. Because I was a woman leading a team of men. They were seeing me standing up, a young woman leading a team of men. They were like, we have to educate our daughters. And I'm glad that through our approach, women stand up, give talks in their community. We're seeing more and more girls coming up. More and more girls wanting to even do male things like play football, not only netball.
Nice.
But then some of them are saying, I want to become a ranger, or I want to work in tourism. So we're getting more and more young girls coming up in the communities who want to do conservation-related work, which is very exciting.
Fantastic. Now, you also now have Gorilla Conservation Coffee, which I've read that is quite a very well-celebrated brand. Congratulations. Tell us a bit about how that began, and also where is it now, and where can people find it? Tell us a bit about Gorilla Conservation Coffee.
Gorilla Conservation Coffee is, we founded this social enterprise in 2015. Whenever I would go to visit the gorillas, I often cross coffee farms, and we found out that those farmers were not getting a fair market or a steady price. So they're still entering the forest to poach, the daika, the bush pig, and collect firewood. And because if they wanted meat, they couldn't sell their coffee to buy meat because they weren't getting a good price for their coffee. It was easier for them to just go and hunt the animals in the park. So my husband said to me that why don't we start a global coffee brand to save gorillas through coffee, one sip at a time through coffee.
Creative.
And so that's how it started. And luckily we found that the windy coffee is very delicious because it's grown at a high altitude for Arabica, because we were focusing on Arabica. It grows at a high altitude. The soils are perfect. They have some volcanic nature to them. And all of that produces very good coffee. And so that helped. Because the first customer may come because they want to help gorillas, but they won't come back for a repeat cup of coffee if it doesn't taste good. So we were excited when Coffee Review reviewed it as the top 30 coffees in the world in California. It was number 29 out of number 30. And we knew that if we worked with the coffee experts, Peter Binu, who Uganda Coffee Development Authority referred to us, He's fantastic because he got a very good sample, which we sent to California. So now we're getting all the farmers to be like that. And it's really helped to complement what we're doing, because it's helped to strengthen our livelihood program very much within CTPH. But it's its own social enterprise. So it's a company, for-profit company, limited by shareholding, because we want to attract impact investors.
Okay.
And so it's called a hybrid. We have an NGO plus a business together.
Yeah.
It's called a hybrid.
Okay.
And it's been really exciting because we give the farmers above market price only for good coffee. We only buy good coffee from them. Now, the bad coffee, they take back and sell to someone else. So that, if they do things properly, they pick the coffee at the right time,
They'll get more.
they'll produce good coffee.
Yeah.
Because they can. All of them can produce. All their coffee can be good.
Yeah.
But they just have to follow the right processes in growing it, in processing it.
Yeah.
And we help them with all of that. And so once they sell it to us, some of it is premium, some of it is specialty. Like the 92 points is specialty coffee. Premium starts from 85 upwards. Specialty is from 90 upwards. So we are able to be able to sell it at a very high price, and we sell it to tourists who are visiting Uganda. They meet these farmers and they want to support them.
Yeah.
A lot of tourists now are conscious travelers. They really want to feel like they're helping wherever they go.
Yeah.
So they don't only want to visit gorillas and other wildlife, they want to help the communities. And if they've met them and they know, this coffee is from the communities, would rather drink it than just any old coffee in a supermarket. We don't know where it's from.
Yeah.
So this coffee is very popular in the lodges around Bwindi, because they can say this coffee is supporting local farmers. In fact, our biggest customer at the beginning was the community lodge built by the Bwindi community, Haven Lodge,
wow.
because we were supporting their own farmers,
Yeah.
and they were very happy. And so those are our main customers, but we also get anyone flying out of the airport. When they go to Entebbe duty-free transit shop, it's the coffee that they prefer to buy, because it's very well branded with my favorite gorilla, Kanyonyi,
Yeah.
who I knew since he was a baby and
Yeah.
operated on his older sister when she had a rectal prolapse.
Yeah.
And so everybody likes to buy the coffee. They like the story, they like the branding, and they like the taste. But we also have Ugandans are beginning to drink coffee.
Yeah.
Yes, we are the largest coffee producing country in the world, even more than Ethiopia, if you add Robusta.
Oh, wow.
But we don't market ourselves well enough. And we don't drink our coffee. The Ethiopians drink their coffee.
Yeah.
So Uganda Coffee Development Authority is a key partner, because we're helping to market Ugandan coffee. Because when people hear gorilla conservation coffee, they know gorillas are in Uganda, so this coffee must be from Uganda.
Yeah.
So they love that we're helping people to know Uganda has good coffee. And that's really nice. We have customers also in Europe, in UK, America, New Zealand, Australia, Canada. Many people want to buy the coffee.
Yeah.
So we have distributors in UK, USA. We had distributors. Now we're going to work with a fulfillment company, but people are addicted to it.
Yeah.
They keep calling me, your coffee is the best. When can we get to drink it? They keep sending me messages from America. So, and other places. New Zealand as well. We have a buyer there who buys coffee and he takes ours. And what we do is we make sure they co-brand, so everyone knows the coffee is from Bwindi.
Okay.
Because that's another problem with coffee. It gets lost along the value chain. It gets mixed with other coffees. People don't know where it's from. And if they know where it's from, it's now called traceability. It has more meaning for them. You can even charge people more highly.
Okay.
So we're within that, they call them lifestyle of health and sustainability consumers. People who want to, when they drink something or eat something or buy something, they say, was it done properly, ethically?
Yeah.
What did the people suffer? Did they get a good price? Were the animals protected? Was the environment not destroyed? Those are our main customers, and those are growing all over the world.
Yeah.
And so we have all of those, plus the growing number of coffee drinking Ugandans. We have a gorilla conservation cafe in Entebbe, which I hope you get to visit.
Yes.
Well, I was supposed to have the interview there, but it was a bit noisy.
Yeah.
And in that cafe, we only serve coffee from the farmers around Bwindi.
Okay.
Only Bwindi. And our dream is, to only serve coffee from any farmers around gorilla habitats at the gorilla conservation cafes.
Nice.
And so we have one there. We're trying at Queen Elizabeth National Park. We have a small cafe together with the Wildlife Authority. Again, we serve the coffee there. And at Bwindi, we have a gorilla conservation camp where we also serve the coffee there. So those are the places where we have the gorilla conservation cafes within Uganda. And we're hoping that in other countries we could have them as well.
Okay. And
a donation from every bag sold goes to support, is put aside to support the work of conservation through public health,
Okay.
improving community health, gorilla health,
Yeah.
and conservation education. So in that process, we're producing sustainable financing for conservation.
Yeah.
And we got our first loan from the Wild Wildlife Fund Switzerland in our program that they developed to provide sustainable financing for conservation.
Okay.
It's called an Impact Investment for Conservation program.
Okay.
And that really helped to get the business off the ground.
Yeah. Fantastic. And I like that the world is, as you said, people are being a bit more careful about what they consume. They want to know where it's coming from, how it's made, as you said. Even the gadgets that we run around with, I see people raise questions about where phones are made, whether there's
Coltan,
yes, yeah,
like in DRC.
yeah. I like that all the work you do is evolving around really improving livelihoods, especially in those host communities that need it the most. Now, as we head towards the end of the conversation, I'd like to bring back the discussion of whether gorilla tourism is hurting mountain gorillas. Last year was, I believe, 30 years since mountain gorilla tourism began. And I don't know if that was also your 30th anniversary as your first visit to the mountain gorillas, or is it this year?
This year.
This year, okay. I'd like to know, I do hear a number of people advocating for more and more wild gorillas to be habituated, but also there's a discussion going around to increase the number of visitors to the mountain gorillas to 12. I know back in 2010 there were 6, then the number was increased to the 8 that we have today, and I hear people are asking for more. Do you feel like we should be putting a foot on the gas, on the brake pedal, or should we not worry too much about it? Are we just being, if I could call them, hardcore conservationists, or should we really be concerned when such conversations come up?
We should be very concerned, because responsible tourism to gorillas and chimpanzees, which we're so closely related to that we can make each other sick, is a responsibility for everyone.
Yeah.
Not only the government or the donors, but the tour operators, the tourists, the conservationists, all of us who want these animals to be around for future generations. It's our responsibility.
Yeah.
Gorilla tourism, I know in my chapter says is tourism a necessary evil. For gorillas, it's something you really have to think about, and chimpanzees as well.
Yeah.
Because how much is too much? The money is so much. Now, when I started out, people were paying $250 to visit gorillas for a non-resident. Now it's gone up to $800
Yeah.
over these past 30 years. In Rwanda, it's even higher.
Yeah.
It's now, it was 1,502, but I hear they're increasing it even further
Wow.
for foreign non-residents. So the money is a lot. And we minimize the people who visit the gorillas. It used to be 6,
Yeah.
now it's 8. Both to prevent behavior disturbance, too much behavior disturbance, but to minimize the people visiting them and the disease transmission. And also when you're with the gorillas and you so many, you can't even get good photos. And it's hard for the ranger guide to manage the people. But the more people you bring, the more risks you bring to the gorillas.
Yeah.
So it's rather than increasing the number of people, would rather increase the price. So that, because it's all about getting more money from them.
Yeah.
So why not increase the price? And now, because it's the only place in the world to safely see mountain gorillas is Uganda and Rwanda, the permits are still fully booked in the high season. You're not going to discourage people. The Wildlife Authority has tried in the low season to reduce the permit so that more people can come, expatriates, Ugandans. And in fact, for Ugandans, it's much less.
Yeah.
But still very few Ugandans.
So many people
visit.
don't know.
Yeah, Ugandans is just,
Yeah.
as the Ua Idi in someone that said, don't quote it in dollars, quote it in shillings.
Yeah.
It's been 250,000 shillings.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is about $70. But for the foreign non-resident, it was 10 times as much.
Mm.
So we need to find that delicate balance. Yes, we want them, they're really lifting people out of poverty around Bwindi, the whole country, because some of the money from gorilla tourism goes to support national parks and wildlife reserves that don't have enough tourists to cover operational costs, to pay for rangers, patrols and all that.
Yeah.
So Uganda has 22 protected areas and only about 6 or 7 of them can raise enough money to cover operational costs. So gorilla tourism money goes to support the other protected areas.
Yeah.
So, but it's a very delicate balance. If we have too many people and you wipe out a gorilla group, then that money will not be there. The COVID pandemic was a big challenge because COVID, just like we were picking it up from each other very easily.
Yeah.
We were so worried the gorillas would pick it. So immediately everyone had to start wearing masks. The distance increased from 7 meters to 10 meters. Extra checks. They measure your temperature before you go in. Much more hand washing, everything. And now monkeypox is also something to worry about just now. You know, because monkeypox is now in DRC, which is near Bwindi, near bordering the gorilla parks and the chimpanzee parks. So, and it's in Uganda now. So all those diseases can easily jump back and forth between people and animals. So it's something that we have to be very, very, very concerned about.
Yeah.
And so it's important to have that delicate balance. But interestingly, the mountain gorilla populations which have grown, the gorilla populations that have grown are only the mountain gorillas, where there's viable ecotourism. It contributes even more to Rwanda revenue than Uganda, because Rwanda has only about, I think, 4 national parks, four protected areas.
Yeah.
Uganda has 22. And so, but it has to be done carefully. Rwanda, even if they double the price, they still have, their groups are still full. So it shows that there's a high demand for this product.
Yeah.
Instead of increasing the people, let's increase the price. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's definitely helping a lot. And it's the reason why the numbers of mountain gorillas are growing.
Yeah.
The mountain gorillas, when I first started out, were only about 650, and now they're over 1,000.
Yeah.
And we hope with the next census we'll count many more, which is going to start towards the end of this year in Bwindi, and then Virunga later when it's safer. Okay. So for sure, tourism, you'd say, is a necessary evil. It has to be done very, very carefully.
Very carefully.
Yeah, and actually, during the pandemic, even if people couldn't visit the gorillas, we told them you can buy coffee and we can keep farmers or poachers out of the forest by giving them a good price for good coffee. So the pandemic also showed us that as much as it's a necessary evil, you shouldn't over-depend on it.
Yeah.
There has to be other ways that communities can earn a living sustainably beyond tourism. Because they were using tourism money to buy food. So they were starving, and poaching went up during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So now we told them, we started supporting them with ready-to-grow gardens, so they're fast-growing seedlings that can grow within 4 months, so that they know that they always have food to eat. Okay. So even when tourism came back, we said, when tourism comes back, continue to have something to eat. The money from tourism can be for paying school fees or other things, but not for feeding you. Yeah. Because we found that people are poaching because they were hungry. And so coffee is a good food security crop as well, because you can plant it with other food crops, and the money from coffee can help you to buy food. Yeah. And so those are all the things that we're trying to promote within the community, so that they're not just depending on tourism to survive.
Now, maybe just finally, when you talked about balancing this thing, tourism and conservation, each time I'm down in Bwindi and I get areas of the forest, it's quite a stark contrast between the forest and, if I could call it, human settlement.
Yes.
You have the human side, which looks extremely dry, and then you have the forest. And when you were just talking earlier, you said that the number of mountain gorillas is continuing to increase and increase, which is a plus, which we are all happy about. But I don't know if there is going to reach a time when these mountain gorillas run out of space, and if that's something that concerns you guys in conservation, or it's not really a big deal. I know for a fact that among the primates, it's just us and the mountain gorillas. No, among the Great Apes, it's just us and the mountain gorillas whose population is increasing. So as you have you have more humans increasing, then you have more mountain gorillas increasing, but that little forest is not really increasing in size. Have you thought about this, or is this something we shouldn't really be concerned about?
It's something we're very concerned about.
Yeah.
As the numbers keep going up, can the forest sustain those large population of mountain gorillas?
Yeah.
Yes, it's something we're very concerned about. Since when I first worked with them, there were about 300. Now there's over 459. So they're almost doubling. Yeah. Basically, hopefully census will sure that they've even doubled. But the space is not growing.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's resulting in more and more gorillas having their home range, some of their home range outside the park. And so something that Conservation Through Public Health is doing is speaking to community members who are willing to sell their land to lodges to try and sell it for the public good so that we can expand Bwindi. So that's something that we're working on very closely with Bwindi National Park Management. And we're hoping that we'll be able to convince people to expand the land because Bwindi needs to expand. And anyway, they can't do anything with that land. That's why they're willing to sell it to a tour operator to put up a lodge. But the lodges will lock the gorillas in, and then there'll be more conflict because then they'll go to lodges and even pick up diseases.
Yeah.
So it's very important that we act fast before it's too late. And it's something that we're working on as Conservation Through Public Health.
Okay. Then this is the final question. This is more of a personal question. I feel like you've done it all, if I could use that as a phrase. Yes, you've won so many awards, and many more, I guess, are on the way. You've created change in the communities. You've impacted lives. You've transformed gorillas, the lives of the gorillas from the times they had suffering from scabies. Got them through the COVID pandemic. I'd like to know what else is there to be done. What does the future look like for Dr. Gladys, CTPH, Gorilla Conservation Coffee, and all this beautiful work that you're doing?
I would say that there's still a lot to be done.
Yeah.
We still have a lot to be done. As much as we've done a lot,
Yeah.
there's still a lot to be done.
Yeah.
We would like to make sure that all the gorilla species are safe in Africa. We want to reverse the trend of extinction like we did at Bwindi. So we'd like to team up with partners in different countries in Africa. Gorillas are found in 10 countries in Africa, and we want to team up with all those partners to be able to scale our model of conservation through public health and gorilla conservation coffee within those 10 countries in Africa.
Yeah.
So that's one big ambitious plan we have. We also want to see how we can work with other partners within Uganda to scale the One Health model in other protected areas like Queen Elizabeth National Park, which is a savanna park, Murchison Falls, Kidepo, Pianupe Wildlife Reserve. We've done a little bit of work there, but would love it to be sustained by the local partners.
Yeah.
And other places in Africa. We want to engage children more in conservation. I'm the vice president of the African Primatological Society, where we're building African leadership in primate research and conservation. We held the second conference here in Uganda in 2019. We had over 300 delegates, and the Minister of Tourism, Wildlife and Antiquities, Honorable Ephraim Kamuntu, was guest of honor representing the Prime Minister, Honorable Rukahana Rugunda, at the time. And we had the Japanese ambassador there. It was a really high-profile event. And we had 85% of delegates were African, local Africans presenting papers. Normally it's the other way around. 10% are local Africans if you go to the International Primate Society. And the biggest delegations, other than Uganda, were from Nigeria, South Africa, and Madagascar. Nigeria and Madagascar. Those were the biggest delegations. So we want to really have a homegrown movement of African conservationists. There's some partners in Nigeria who'd like to partner with us, Obudu Conservation Center. They came to visit us recently. Della, she's called, she wants to help us to, she wants to do some of our One Health approach in Nigeria. She founded Obudu Conservation Center with her mom. So we want to just get more and more Africans leading these efforts. We want to engage the next generation in conservation.
Yeah.
And my sons have been they've been there as part of it from when they were little.
Yeah.
So like Indigo recognized his first elephant in the national park when he was 2. Nice. Elephant, he called it. And I was excited when he wrote this book, Zookeeper for a Week. When he was 13, he worked at the zoo and wrote an article for Toto magazine, which ended up in a book a few years later. Him and his little brother are very much into conservation, and they have many children in the Bwindi community who are their friends. Yeah. I've ever taken them plus 2 children, a girl and a boy, teenagers. I took Indigo, the girl and the boy, to the gorillas when they were 15, 16 years old, and they got to see the gorillas, and it was called an NGen science show, where the children were leading the efforts, and Tendo led the effort in the lab because he was only 12.
Yeah.
So it's so important to get children into conservation. Lots of children want to go and have this experience Indigo had because of this. Little children, he's their hero.
Yeah.
Because they're seeing someone who looks like them,
Yeah.
who's out there, also protecting the animals in the zoo. So we're really grateful to Dr. James Musingis and his team for making this possible. So yes, we want to engage more and more youth in conservation. I'm on the board of Wildlife Clubs of Uganda. The Jane Goodall Institute has Roots and Shoots. All those programs are really helping that the next generation will be conservationists. The next generation of parliamentarians will have a greater percentage who are conservationists. You don't have to have conversations about cutting down Bugoma Forest Reserve to plant sugarcane if you have more and more people in parliament who care about wildlife and understand that if wildlife is secure and the forests are secure, our future is much more secure. So we need to have a lot more of those. We need to engage the next generation much more in conservation. Yeah. So there's still a lot to do, very much a lot to do. I'm also on the Women for Environment Leadership Council, where we're mentoring women to lead conservation efforts, if that's what they want to do. Yeah. So I'm a founder member of We Africa, which was started by people in Kenya, initiated by a lady called Dr. Leila Haza, who founded Lion Guardians, and she convinced all of us who were there, the Leadership Council, we're about 8 of us, to really help. And so every year we train about 25 women in the cohort, and they each of them are part of this, and they improve whatever they're doing, whichever field of conservation they're in. We've had lawyers there, we've had all kinds of people. As long as they're doing something to do in the environment and conservation, they can be part of that cohort.
Yeah. Wow, that's a fantastic point to end today's episode on. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Dr. Gladys. And if you are listening, please go and look for Walking with Gorillas. Look for the book. It's a really, really fantastic book. We only have a few minutes here that we can have a chat about Dr. Kalema's illustrious journey. But if you'd like to really dive deep and really enjoy this story further, please pick up the book. We'll leave links down below to how you can keep tabs with CTPH and Gorilla Conservation Coffee. So if you are listening to this on any of your streaming platforms, you will find that in the podcast description below. And if you are watching this on YouTube, you'll find this in the video description.
And something else I'd like to actually do is start a blog.
Oh, nice.
Now that I've mentioned it, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I have a new communications manager, Cosmas Matembe, and we're gonna work on that blog every week about other things to do with conservation and things which are connected to conservation. Because every time I see things changing, moving. Some are very exciting, some are very depressing, and I feel that it's important to raise awareness about these issues through a blog.
Yeah.
Keep following us on social media, and thank you so much for hosting us.
Beyond all odds, she did it, carving out a path of her own and now inspiring people, young and not so young, all across the world, to go out there and do what they love, creating positive change in this world that needs it the most. And we must be reminded that building a better Uganda, Africa, or even the world at large is a responsibility for us all. And I think with the One Health approach that Dr. Gladys Kalema and her team crafted so many years ago, we can all indeed agree that the future of wildlife lies in the hands of those who live next to those places where it roams naturally. Indeed, the future of our continent's wildlife lies in the hands of those wise indigenous communities who've lived and coexisted with this wildlife for centuries upon centuries. We will leave links down below to the CTPH website and Gorilla Conservation Coffee as well. So feel free to look out for that. And I cannot say it enough, get yourself a copy of Walking with Gorillas. That's a book by Dr. Gladys Kalema. I think it's available in both a digital version through Kindle and this lovely hardcover copy that I'm so fortunate to own. Yeah, so get yourself a copy. It's a beautiful story that I think everyone can learn so many lessons from, and also get a lot of inspiration from as well. Alright guys, that should be the end of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And if you did, go ahead and hit that like button, share the link in your circles, and let's get this conversation beyond this platform. And for those of you who just can't have enough and would like to hear or listen to more of such conversations, make it a point to subscribe to the podcast. And also check out some of those earlier episodes that we've done. There are plenty of those that we've done in the past. And for those listening through Apple Podcasts, let me remind you that you can leave a star rating as well as a review on the podcast. That really helps us. As we already said, the podcast is available on all major streaming platforms, including Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Deezer, Castbox, Pandora. And for those tuning in the US, you will also be able to access it through iHeartRadio. If you'd like to make a contribution to the conversation in the future, feel free to send me an email on contact@jonathanbenaya.com or ahabenathan@pm.me. And you never know, your question could be featured in one of the future episodes. Both those email addresses will be linked down below in the podcast notes and YouTube description, if that's where you're accessing the podcast from. And maybe just lastly, I'd like to say a very big thank you to our patrons. It's through your monthly pledges that we're able to keep this platform alive. And as I said at the beginning, if you'd like to join this community, there will be a link down below in the podcast notes and the video description for those listening through YouTube. All right, thank you so much for tuning in, and let's meet again in the next one.
The Jonathan Benaya podcast and its sister show, the Africa Safari podcast, are not only inspired by nature and travel, but by the people that work in it and for it.